the guru of Squad 00, the assassin like no other. Yes, I'm the best at what I do. One of the most notorious YouTube anime and manga community. Don't doubt the infinite, please. The first of its kind. Yes, that's right. The first video of its kind dealing with scientific analyses of various characters that you come across in fiction. Now, I often hear people talk about, oh, you can't use real world logic. What is real world? There is no such thing as the real world. Reality extends to far more than one wants to take into consideration. Every world and universe has its own sets of logic, okay? Whether it be in what we deem as the real world, or most of us anyway, and what we deem as fiction. That's just how it is. So, without further ado, let's get into this one. I thought it'd be proper to go into one of the most interesting, misunderstood, and very complex characters in terms of all fiction. And he is none other than the Incredible Hulk, Bruce Banner. Now, the Hulk is one of those characters that people want to try and say, oh, you can't apply science to. Why not? What is science? Data gained through observation of the 5 senses. And then there's a few other things that go alongside of it. When you consider Bruce Banner, there's a few things you must consider before going into what he became, which is the Hulk himself. Number one, he is a doctor of pretty much physics, okay? This dude is one of the top 3 most intelligent men. I'll just keep it men because there's a lot of dudes in the Marvel Universe. Some may say more intelligent, but at least on Earth. One of the top 3 minds you can argue on Earth. Or no, top 4, excuse me. It's him, Hank Pym, who's also the Ant-Man or Goliath, and probably a couple other names. Mr. Fantastic Reed Richards, as well as Iron Man Tony Stark. Now, in regards to physics, no one probably has him beat. When you look at his backstory, it's very interesting because of the abusive situation he had with his father, as well as the troubled past he had growing up. Not in no criminal center, he was delinquent like a lot of others, but the fact of dealing with bullying and a few other things messed him up psychologically. And that comes into a key part later on down the line with who the Hulk is and the various incarnations of the Hulk. When you also look at him himself, here's this skinny, relatively frail, if you mind, weak individual. And we look at who the Hulk is. Complete opposite. Highly intelligent. And then the Hulk initially, not so much. So take all of this into consideration. And now let's deal with a few factors with the Hulk. I'll break it down into 5. First of all, there's the whole gamma radiation situation. Now, a lot of people's like, well, how did he survive the initial gamma blast? Now, there's a few things you got to take into consideration about his survival. As, always there's a few things. Number one, he was obviously not directly impacted by the explosion. This should be pure and simple the fact that he had time to get Rick Jones out of this situation, pushed him aside into a ditch or whatever it was. Okay? That's point number one. So he wasn't directly, he didn't survive the explosion itself. Now let's deal with the radiation. Obviously, it wasn't enough radiation in this specific area to kill Rick Jones as well. It say he got hit by a direct flow of gamma radiation, or gamma rays, I should say. It didn't say radiation; it just said gamma rays, which is a completely. It's similar, but it's an important detail that we must consider. He didn't get hit by directly with the radiation. Okay. If it was radiation like people were trying to say, then Rick Jones should be dead as well. Rick Jones survived. He didn't even get hit. So we have to take that consideration. It was prototype tested. Now, the thing about it with the gamma rays is, in my research, most gamma rays pretty much pass through objects, unless it's certain crystals, lead barriers, and things that slow up gamma rays from moving. Gamma rays are very short. They're the shortest wavelength on the electromagnetic spectrum. They're the most powerful, most energetic. Gamma rays, when they emit, it's this powerful explosion. It's pretty much nuclear, okay? So it's different from X-rays. Keep that in mind. It's not it's colorless, odorless, it's not visible in the visual light spectrum. It's far higher. It's not like the infrared and whatever that are lower. It's like the ultraviolet X-rays, and then there's gamma rays. They're the highest of them all. Gamma radiation, or I should say gamma rays, when they produce energy, it's speculated, I should argue, that in one short burst of gamma radiation, at least from a stellar, talking about actual stars, one small burst is more powerful than what, in speculation, is going to be the amount of energy that the sun of this solar system, the star of this solar system, will give off in this entire lifetime. That's a lot of power, ladies and gentlemen. And this is the kind of stuff that Bruce Banner was exposed to. Now, furthermore, on the survival, not only was it not direct impact by an explosion, as well as actual radiation, we can safely say, but within the Marvel Universe, there's a few reasons. 3 I will give, and there may be a few other reasons. 3 reasons as to why Bruce Banner survived and then became what he became. It could simply be a hereditary trait that was dormant that we know nothing about, in that it absorbed the gamma radiation, or at least was able to absorb some of it and dispel some of it, or allow most of it to pass through and some of it cloned, or something along those lines. And it's not too far-fetched, considering the very fact that his cousin got a blood transfusion and she became the She-Hulk. So it's not all out there in speculation or in hypothesis. Another possibility is that he himself is just this very rare human who, gamma radiation, and we see this with multiple Hulk-like creatures. I mean, you have the She-Hulk, you have Rolk, or Red Hulk, which was General Thunderbolt. His daughter became Red She-Hulk. Okay? Red She-Hulk. You have Doc Samson. You even have, to a degree, Rick Jones becoming A-Bomb. So, it may be potentially with these right now, they all associated with Hulk, but we don't know too much about it. So, it may just be a rare genetic, whether it be in everything or just be some, it can activate. If it's not too huge of a concentrated dose, but just enough that it activates and triggers, I don't know. That's another possibility, where certain individuals, or maybe being exposed long enough in small, very small increments, being around will allow for this behavior. I don't know. Like Rick Jones had been around Bruce Banner for years, so before he became A1. So I don't know. That's another thing to take into consideration. I mean, you did have a leader and a few others get exposed, but I don't know. And the third thing, which is probably the highest probability, but the hereditary one is it's questionable, but the probably highest probability of it is that Bruce Banner is in fact a mutant, both in the sense of the way that typical science considers a mutant, that he mutated. His cells and whatever else began to mutate. It's very likely. It's obviously that's what happened, and he became the Hulk. But he may also simply be a mutant, in the sense of the Marvel Universe. And like Wolverine, aka Logan, aka James Howlett, Scott Summers, who was Cyclops, you got Jean Grey, Rogue, Gambit, everybody, y'all know, Professor X, Charles Xavier, Magneto, all them. Okay, all them cats. Toad, you name it. and white. So he may in fact have been a mutant who hadn't, who hadn't, showcased his mutant capabilities. And this may have accelerated the process. The gamma rays may have accelerated the process. Now, the reason why that's highly acceptable, if you want to consider it, is because when you look at, let's just say, Dr. Hank McCoy, Hank, while he did show signs as a teenager, he was different. He didn't become, the blue-haired beast till much later in life. And in fact, he had a second transformation, a second mutation, where he became more of a feral cat. Then you had Iceman Bobby Drake. Iceman Bobby Drake, you don't even tell the difference in him. You have Gambit, where you can't tell. Wolverine, for the most part, you can't tell. Magneto, Professor X, Jean Grey, many others. You cannot tell for the most part, from an external view, that they have a mutation. Now, they may showcase this and whatever, but it is possible that, let's just say, a turn of events, that Bobby Drake may have not even, focused on it, if not for Charles Xavier being there. We don't know how long mutants have been around. You see what I'm saying? So, take that for what it's worth. So, it's possible that he's a latent mutant that just was not aware of what his mutation was. Now, moving on. Him becoming the Hulk. Now, he wasn't always green, he was originally gray, and it was a metamorphosis process. Originally, he would turn an out-of-control monster, and then at night, it's similar to, in the morning, he would turn back. Similar to pretty much a werewolf kind of reaction. I'll call this the initial phase. Then we see him more in his typical fashion, and then he tried to, separate and come back, and it was Joe Fixit, and a few other things. Now, the metamorphosis, it makes a lot of logical sense as to why there's multiple metamorphosis of the Hulk, because for two reasons. Number one, anatomical adjustment, and number two, a huge segment, which is psychology, the psyche of Bruce Banner. Now, as far as in the coloration, that's questionable at best. Maybe artistic interpretation, whatever. Doesn't really matter. But as far as an anatomical adjustment, the fact is, he grew in size, but he's on always the same size. Some forms of the Hulk are bigger, some are not. Okay? And there's reasons for that. You can say, some are stronger, some are not. It's very possible that the gamma radiation, and I'll get more into the science behind the Hulk itself, the specific nuts and bolts of it, more so than his character in a bit, but it's very possible that the Hulk in his lesser forms, I'll call it, his body's adjustment and, I should say, utilization of the gamma rays, of their influence on the body, whether it be a mutation, directly, or the triggering, whatever the case may be, was not as high. So, pretty much, he was a lesser than his potential. It's like, think of it like a car or a plane, doesn't really matter. Whatever machine you want to consider it. And the motor is running at, let's say, 30% efficiency, or a 50% efficiency, or maybe we even jump it up to 90% efficiency, but the intake's off. Let's say the transmission is faulty, the exhaust doesn't run as efficiently, and there's a few other processes. Okay, so pretty much I'm arguing that the utilization of the potential of the gamma rays or gamma radiation, whichever is specifically targeting the Hulk at the time, is not very effective, as it is in his later forms, where he's massive, where he's colossal, where he's got this seemingly unlimited potential of strength, power, and speed, all this other junk. And I say seemingly because we just don't know. We don't know enough. The Hulk's never been pushed to his absolute limits. He's never had time to be pushed. He's never had a battle that requires him to his whole rage factor, which we'll get into very shortly, hopefully. Now, moving on to the second part is psychology, and this is the huge thing about the Hulk. The Hulk had the right psyche to become the Hulk, meaning Dr. Bruce Banner was broken enough to become the Hulk. Most people wouldn't be able to become the Hulk. I don't think most people have the mind to cope with being the Hulk. Was not psychologically near insane. Bruce Banner is near insane. This, after all these years, anyone who knows anything about the Hulk should know this. He is borderline insane. He's walking the borderline between, or the bridge, whatever you want to refer to, between sanity and insanity. He's very thin, very narrow, and unless you've lived it, unless you've approached it, it's kind of hard to explain. Nervous breakdowns don't begin with his dealings with the Hulk. All these internal problems that had all these Devil Hulk and everything else should showcase that there's some psychological screw-ups because of his childhood and otherwise. He got kicked out of school. I mean, he made a bomb when he was a kid. When he was a pretty much middle school, high school, whatever it was. When he was a teenager, he made a bomb. There's some serious psychological problems going wrong with him. And that helped to manifest into what he became as a Hulk, which kind of supports my whole thing about him being a mutant, a latent mutant. Because if he's a latent mutant, then you have a psychological trigger. Well, we've seen what happens with other mutants and their psychological problems, i.e. Jean Grey, anybody? Especially when she has a Phoenix Force. I mean, seriously, Rogue, we've seen that. Pretty much Wolverine, we've seen that. Scott Summers, to a degree, we've seen that. When you mess with these mutants' psychology, when you mess with their psyche, some very strange things happen. But when he begins to come to terms with who he is, as a man, as a person, as him and the Hulk, we start to see emerging, and the intelligence starts to showcase. That's a key factor in this. His control of himself. And his battle internal. That's why it's one of the greatest internal struggles in fiction history. Period. The beast within. And pretty much his struggles within became outward. When he dealt with the struggles internally, he changed again. It was a transition. It's not a coincidence that this happened, ladies and gentlemen. So the psychology of the Hulk is massive important as much as the gamma radiation and as much as his physical attributes. Now, continuing on with his physical attributes. When you look at the Hulk, the gamma radiation, and the reason I brought up about the utilization, it's very likely that the Hulk was one of two things, either a generator or a battery. And when you look at it like that, the Hulk, instead of using, well, it is chemical, maybe to a lesser degree, but instead of replacing mainly chemical interactions, it is on a nuclear scale. And gamma rays, because of their amount of power, understand this, because of the amount of energy you use in each explosion, that could be a key factor as to why he's so damn strong. You understand? His whole, and if you take it to the fact that his whole atomical structure was changed. This would cause a change in his cellular structure, in his molecular structure, in his organic structure overall, like the organism and whatnot. And it would help to explain why he became bigger, stronger physically, along with this whole psychological, thing. That the gamma rays probably help alter that as well. And so, if he is a generator or a battery, this would explain his possibly limited potential, because he's not necessarily tapping into the atomic level all the time. When those emotional triggers, somewhat psychological, but to the second point, his adrenaline base. Now it's, let's say it's firing up, it's revving up the engine, and now it's digging deeper into the whole atomic factor. The cells are starting to really get motivated, so to say, and the mitochondria and the other parts of it. and more of a unison and a sole focus. The adrenaline levels, and if you know anything about adrenaline, if you've ever lived it, whether in athletics, martial arts, you've been in very stressful situations, you'll know the fight or flight kicks in. Okay, and for the Hulk, it's all fight on another level. Let's just put it this way, if humans can lift cars and other things, regular people lift a car because of a shot of adrenaline going through his or her body, then what do you think someone who's become, I don't even know how tall at times, over 8, 9, 10 plus feet, however tall the Hulk can get? Think about that. The size, the muscles, the aerobic processes that goes through, all the blood, oxygen flow, all that being juiced up. And the fact that he's a man as well adds to that whole element. Not only is it coming from that and whole skeletal change and everything, and really who knows the anatomy of the Hulk really like that, and what in the processes and how they will affect with a shot of adrenaline. But also consider the potential energy and the kinetic energy. Now, if the Hulk, in his greater forms, is able to utilize more efficiently, whether it be oxygen, whether it be adrenaline, whether it be whatever. Also, let's just say his body is able to store potential energy. And this would also account for why he can reach those next levels when he becomes increasingly enraged, increasingly infuriated, and whatever else he may encounter within himself emotionally, because the psychological triggers will say, ding, ding, we're gonna dope you up pretty much. And if he's not only getting doped up, because it would run off fast, but we know this dude has crazy stamina and crazy durability, crazy endurance. So I'm getting my theorizing is that he taps into the potential energy stored within his body, whether it be when he's in his Bruce Banner human state, or the stuff that he generates. It's like sugars being generated into fat, but the Hulk doesn't have fats like humans do. So he still has a stored up energy. It just hasn't been released. When he gets enraged, it taps into that. And because of the gamma effects not requiring much, and because they're so strong, all bada bing, bada boom, the more enraged he gets, the more stored up cellular-like energy he can bring to the surface. So we don't know how much stored up. If it's at an atomic level and it's not just cellular, that's a lot of stuff. There are trillions of atoms. Trillions. And maybe more. In the size of the Hulk, maybe in the quadrillions or quintillions. So that's how plenty potential energy to be used as kinetic energy. What else? Is there anything else? Oh, his rejuvenation. Well, gamma rays and whatnot can be used in the healing process. So, an accelerated regeneration. I don't even know if Bruce Banner knows the full extent of it as to why, and he can go from it. It's hard as hell to kill the Hulk. There's the survival instincts. The Hulk fights instinctually. He's an instinctual, and then when you add, he's near fighting genius instinctively, and you add in Bruce Banner's complete intellect, is pretty much a fighting genius. It's just natural. It is a natural vibe, which kind of, once again, goes with the whole latent mutant situation. The fact that the power in his legs and the muscles are so strong that we don't know how fast he can be, because he tears up the ground before he can, take off in a running sort of fashion. So he can leap, hundreds if not thousands of miles. I forget how far it is. Correct me if you will. What else? The amount of strength he has, and seemingly very basic but very complex. I didn't know how long this video was going to be, But I hope I was able to enlighten you, to provide a different perspective, to provide a logical and rational reason as to who the Hulk is from a scientific perspective. Unexpected one to like, comment, subscribe. Tell me your thoughts on the Hulk. What are your thoughts on him from a logical, rational manner? I mean, done other videos you can do on him as a character, but I really do think that the gamma rays, what they are, their very essence, the psychology of the Hulk specifically, meaning inherently within Bruce Banner, as well as other essences of who he possibly is, such as being a mutant, are the causes as to why, to explain the Incredible Hulk becoming the Incredible Hulk, and why it's actually logically and rationally possible for him specifically. Alright, y'all, have a beautiful day, beautiful night. Peace.